San Diegans accomplish great things every day. We care about our neighbors and our community. We are proud of our diversity. We are resilient. We hold our leaders accountable. We live in one of the most dynamic cities in America, the San Diego Union-Tribune, telling San Diego's story for more than 150 years.
Hello, I'm Dr. Gail F. Baker, Vice President and Provost at the University of San Diego.
And I'm Dr. Noelle Norton, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at USD.
For the second year in a row, USD, along with its College of Arts and Sciences and Humanities Center, is proud to return as the presenting sponsor for the 2021 San Diego Union-Tribune Festival of Books.
As a university deeply committed to the liberal arts, USD promotes a form of lifelong learning that ignites curiosity, builds critical connections across different ideas and topics by seeing them from unique perspectives.
Our partnership with the Festival of Books enables all of us avid readers to come together as a community alongside renowned authors from all over the world and to dive deeply into imaginative stories and important themes.
Yes, books do have the ability to open minds and hearts. On behalf of the University of San Diego, we thank you for joining us for today's program to explore the world of books with us.
Enjoy the presentation.
SDCCU makes getting a great deal on an auto loan easy. Whether you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, you can complete your application online from the convenience of your home and get pre-qualified before you shop. And with rates as low as 1.99% APR and 90 days before you have to make your first payment, getting an auto loan has never been easier. Apply today at sdccu.com. SDCCU. It's not big bank banking, it's better.
Hello and welcome. I'm Luis Cruz, Community and Public Relations Director at the San Diego Union-Tribune. I hope you're enjoying the 5th Annual Festival of Books presented by the University of San Diego. Today's discussion features Emmy Award-winning journalist and anchor of NPR's Latino USA, Maria Hinojosa. Maria is the author of Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in a torn America. And we're also very happy to welcome Paola Ramos, host and correspondent for Vice and Vice News, as well as a contributor to Telemundo News and MSNBC. Paola is author of Finding Latinx, In Search of the Voices, Redefining Latino Identity. Today, we're going to explore immigration. We're going to talk about who is or what is Latinx. We'll also discuss what it means to be a journalist, an activist, and an American. Maria, Paola, it is an honor to have you both on this panel. Your books definitely struck a chord with me. I have to admit, I was in tears reading both of your books. It just reminded me a lot of my story, my family story, and the connections with your stories and the people that you interviewed. You beautifully introduce us to human beings that are affected by some of the issues that we're about to discuss. Maria, let's jump in. Let's start with you. Tell us about Once I Was You and why you wanted to write this book.
Well, it's great to be with you, Luis, and mi querida Paola. And what's up, San Diego? I love to say that I lived in San Diego for a moment. Right. It was an important moment in my life. And then it actually allowed me to make a decision to cross the border and move to Tijuana and live in Tijuana while I worked in San Diego, which was actually one of the happiest moments of my life because I was living the two parts of myself 24 hours a day. It was kind of beautiful. Luis, I don't know about Paola, but for me, when you have a kind of journalistic deadline that is a relatively quick turnaround, whether it's, a day or 5 days or even 5 weeks, it's a very different deadline than when you're writing a book. And so writing a book is hard. It's really hard when you're doing it all at the same time. And so I wasn't really looking to write another book. And I'm really thankful in many ways that I'm not thankful of the things that we had to live through because I think the last administration really there was a kind of targeting that we had to live to that was pretty particular and pretty traumatic. And a lot of people suffered as a result. One of the things that it inspired me to do was to kind of say, like, no, I have to write this book. I was on MSNBC. I said this thing. I was engaging with somebody who was a Trump supporter, and he had used the word illegal to refer to human beings. And I said, there's no such thing as an illegal human being. That's the first thing the Nazis did, was to declare the Jews to be an illegal people, as per Elie Wiesel. And that went viral. And as Paola knows, who cares? You go viral and it doesn't really change your life. But I did feel suddenly a deep responsibility to maybe answer that question and clarify the narrative. And that's what pushed me to write the book, which ended up being a memoir, but then a historical memoir. I like to say that there's a lot of the juicy details of being a journalist, of being a Latina, trying to have a family, a partner, you know, etc. But also what was happening journalistically, what's happened in terms of policy, immigration policy in our country. So I'm like, there's a lot of sweet, juicy stuff, but you're going to get a little spinach too. But the spinach is going to be like the spinach from an Italian restaurant that's like, you know, perfect with garlic, lemon, and salt. That's the kind of spinach that's in my book. And I'm really glad that I felt pushed in many ways to write it.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm really glad you did. You can see from my, I don't know if you can see, but I have a lot of sticky notes.
Oh my God.
And, yes. And Paola, the same thing with you. I was running out of sticky notes. I loved both books. Paola, you traveled the country to write Finding Latinx. You started out in Fresno, California, and the Central Valley. My old stomping grounds. I was a TV reporter there. Maybe many years ago, about 20 years ago. Tell us about Finding Latinx and what you hope readers take away from it.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, what inspired me to write it was it was during my time in politics, right? So prior to stepping into the world of journalism, I found myself November 2016 working in the Clinton campaign, 100% convinced that we would win. Right, particularly convinced that the Latinx community would show up in these unprecedented, ginormous, historic numbers. And as the three of us know, that was not the case, right? Less than 50% of us actually showed up to the polls. And so I think in 2016, after many years in politics, sort of living in my bubble, I had this big realization that personally and politically, we had no idea what we were talking about when we were talking about and referring to the Latinx community, right? We missed the nuances, we missed the hybrids, and we missed the voices that weren't directly in front of us on mainstream media, in the stats, in the polls, in the surveys, in the reports. And so that was kind of my beginning into this journey of finding Latinx, when really the journey started with me. I had to sort of uncover my own privilege, understand what it meant to, to be a queer Latina in Miami, and then understand like what it meant to be the other side of Miami that I didn't grow up seeing, which was directly in front of me, like the Black Cubans that my family never had in our Cuban dinner table. And so that was the beginning of what sparked this idea of pretty much going back to the battleground states that I had gone to so many years, but shifting my eyes and shifting the narrative to see what I wasn't seeing back then.
Yeah, I think that was a very surprising, as a former reporter, coming across a lot of these stories. Yes, we come across them as reporters, but I think one of the things that surprised me were some of the segments of Latinos that you came across traveling all over the country. Maria, I follow your social media. You do this as well, where you post. You may be in Mississippi, and ahí están los Latinos también. So I love that. The common theme in your books is this: how immigrants come to the U.S. in search of a better life, for more opportunities for their children. And Maria, you've been covering immigration for a very long time. Talk about, and you're very passionate about this subject, obviously. Talk about the families that are separated at the border and the private detention centers that make a lot of money by housing these migrants. Why is it important for you to tell these stories?
So I don't want to reveal too much, but in the writing of the book, again, all of us in many different ways were working out different our different experience of trauma. And specifically in terms of immigrants of every background, because there are Black immigrants, Latino immigrants who are Afro-Latino, and every kind of background. But those immigrants were really being targeted. So, and you know, the height of it was when children were being taken from their family members as a form of punishment, as a policy. Mm-hmm. And it was then when my mom calls me up in tears, and basically she's like, "Oh my God, it almost happened to you." And you're like, "What are you talking about?" And that's what I end up writing about. And I had no idea. I had no idea, Luis, that something that happened to me as a baby could stay with me so long that you're right. I am passionate about the question of immigration. And I'm always like, well, why? You know, because there are a lot of immigrant journalists who cover sports or banking or cooking or lo que sea. Why? So part of it is uncovering our own very personal history around this, around the particular issue, like in this case, immigration. You know, I have been covering it a long time. I know Paola knows this because, you know, we're colleagues and we watch each other's work. And I think I have a kind of privilege, if you will, because I've been around for a while. So I have a few years in this business and in this country, and attempting to hold politicians accountable. Entonces, se me ha perdido la paciencia. If you're Mexican, you understand the saying, se me ha colmado el plato o estoy hasta aquí. You know, like I have very little patience now for the rhetoric coming from both sides of the aisle. And I think that this is a moment for really dramatic change on immigration. So, and I can say that because I'm a journalist and I can stand, you know, that is what I think needs to happen. I don't think it can be piecemeal. We're going to do this. We're going to try this. I mean, that's all important. But the problem is that the narrative in general about immigrants has become so toxic that's why I keep on pointing to the Biden administration to be like, this is your moment to do something huge, radical, that some people might say, oh my God, what a mistake. But that in the end, because you're smart enough and you're looking at numbers and you understand precisely the voter engagement that Paola was working on with Latinos and Latinas, you know that in order to do that, that's what it's going to take, that level of engagement. So it matters to me. Of course, I was born in Mexico, but at this point, seriously, I'm concerned about the democracy and the future of democracy in this country. And if you're concerned about that, you have to be concerned about the state of Latinos and Latinas in this country.
Paola, why is it important for you to tell these stories?
I mean, I'll piggyback from what Maria said. I mean, I think 100% there is a disconnect right now, particularly in the Democratic Party, between sort of the story that they've been trying to tell and that we've all been trying to tell, which is this country is a nation of immigrants, right? Immigrants are good for us. There's a disconnect between that and then sort of like the words that they're using to tell that story, right? Because you can't really say you're pro this when Title 42 is still in place. No, you can't really say you're pro this when still in another form, families are still being separated because of that policy, right? We're still waiting for immigration reform to happen. And so I think what I'm learning from people like Maria is that perhaps sometimes when I think that patience is correct, I think it is okay to dream big. No, I think for so long we've been told that be patient. No, calmate. Don't ask for too much. Don't ask for too much. It'll come for years. And I think Maria's absolutely right. And I've learned a lot from her in the sense that like it is okay and it is right. And we are worthy enough to ask for big changes. And so in that sense, from the policy perspective, I think, those are my thoughts on that. And then just in general, for me, I mean, like how I sort of tackled immigration in the book was particularly by trying to get the other side of Latinos that are drifting towards Trump, that are being divisive and polarizing, the ones that try and forget that they too are immigrants. I tried to sort of bring in that narrative to remind them of where they came from. Those Cubans that I'm talking to y'all from Miami right now. As we know, countless Cubans that want to forget that they too at some point had to migrate to this country, I use this immigration narrative to remind them of where they came from. To remind them that at the end of the day, the only thing that we all have in common as this community, is that someone in our family, within someone's generation, came to this country looking for the same thing, which is a little bit more liberty, a little bit more liberty than what we left behind. And so that to me keeps me going, because I feel like with that framework, I believe, perhaps naively, I believe that we can bring people in. So that's how I framed it.
Yeah, we're the second largest voting bloc in America. Are you optimistic that Latinos will start, taking advantage of those numbers?
I mean, I think we have. I mean, look at 2020. I think we not only became the largest minority voting bloc, we turned out in historic numbers. 1 out of 10 voters in this country was Latinx, and young Latinos were the ones, obviously, following the footsteps of Black women. But it was young Latinx folks in Arizona, right, in Nevada, throughout Pennsylvania and Georgia, that followed the footsteps of the Black coalition and chose change in this country. And so I am optimistic. I do think there's a dark side that many people don't want to see, which is these numbers that we're still debating of, did Trump almost win 40% of the Latinx vote in 2020? I think that Pew tells you yes. There's other pollsters that say no. I think we still need to figure out what that's about, no? And so that's what I'm concerned about.
All right, so Latinos came out to vote, but Maria says there's a long way to go.
Well, I think part of the problem is that, I mean, Latinos and Latinas are showing up in these great numbers, and oh my God, what's happening in terms of laws on our books to suppress the vote?
Right.
So that's where we have to acknowledge that Latinos and Latinas 2020 was a very particular election, both in the sense of, a socialist candidate like Bernie getting so much love. And on the other hand, we're having, whatever it is, it's a considerable amount of Latinos and Latinas who feel comfortable voting for someone like Donald Trump. And so Paola is right. We have to understand that this is, if you're going to talk about Latinos, Latinas in this, wide umbrella, where we have a kind of cultural understanding, we share a language, we understand a geographical region and a particular history. Pero U.S. politics, and this is the thing that, I mean, I get really excited about, right? Because it's not silent. Hello. Well, who's the most fascinating politician right now? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, part of the squad. So like Alexandria, there are many Alexandrias in San Diego, all across the country, whether they're in Omaha or, Seattle, or in the middle of even Oklahoma, if you will. I mean, I just got back from Mississippi. And within a matter of like a blink of an eye, you will have a generation of young Latinos and Latinas in Mississippi who will come out to vote. And if the political work is done to bring the Black community and the Latino community together in a place like Mississippi, who knows what, I mean, that's where Paola and I are like, oh my God, it's fascinating, because I'm like with an 8-year-old kid, right? 8 years old. When he was 6, his father was taken from him because of the immigration raid in the poultry plants. This little kid who was born in the United States used to want to be a police officer. Ahora, he's like, I never want to be a police officer. So now it's like, and he's engaging with me, who's coming down to report in this, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, well, have you ever thought about, being a lawyer? What about the mayor of your town? What about, and you can just see his eyes. You can just see this little kid's eyes like, wait, really? And I'm like, yeah. Because he was like, I think I want to join the army. And it's like, but do you need a gun to be powerful? Is that the only way that you understand your power? So things are happening in our country that are kind of slamming against Latinos and Latinas in a way that it didn't used to be this way. Like Paola, when you talk to your dad, it didn't used to, we were not the focus of attack. But that focus of attack, there's a response, right? There's a dialectical response, and that's creating another level of awareness, engagement, discussion, and that is inevitable. You can't really put that genie back in the bottle.
Maria, I'm glad you brought up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. Paola, you're right. In many ways, Ocasio-Cortez represents not just a voice for the young, but also a call for justice on behalf of the older generations of Latinos who have paved the way for us. And that's something many first-generation Latinos can relate to. Their win is really their parents' win as well, building on their generations of struggles to get us to this point. Whew, that touched me so much. Why
I mean,
do you feel
yeah.
that way?
Well, I had this conversation with Monica Ramirez, who incredible activist. She's the co-founder of Justice for Migrant Women. And one of the things that I always remember from our conversation is, you know, she comes from a family of farm workers. She always tells me that the big difference between, you know, the younger generation and the older generation is that suddenly, right, older women, older Latinas are now realizing that they have like this army of women that they can fall back on, no? And that sort of allows you to breathe and fly and be in a very different way, because now, you know, you have people to lean on. And I think in many ways, that's what I think of people like AOC. No, AOC is where she is because of the inroads that her parents and her mom made for her. I am where I am because of the inroads that my parents made for me. And my grandmother, no? Who to this day doesn't speak English, who you know, she had a very different life from me. And so I think that's one of the biggest shifts that I see, you know, between the younger and the older generation, that we understand that I can speak loudly, no, and I can speak with force, and I can give my opinion, because I know that I can lean back on people. But my grandmother, that's the interesting thing. My grandmother now has more opinions than she ever has. No, my grandmother now sort of it feels more at ease than I've ever seen her feel, and because I now can catch her, and my sister can do that. And so that's the difference that I see in sort of the dynamics that are happening within the community. You know, that AOC being AOC hopefully will not be an anomaly. No, anyone can be AOC if they want to, but that's because of those that have paved the road for us.
Yeah. And if you think about you know, we do understand that there are many of us who are in dire economic situations as Latinos and Latinas, but also there is extraordinary economic growth in Latinos and Latinas. I mean, extraordinary. I don't have the statistic in front of me, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the largest percentage of new homes being sold right now are being bought by Latinos and Latinas, right? So yeah. We are in fact this economic engine. And Paola is talking a little bit about the question of privilege, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of what Latinos and Latinas that have privilege, what are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a very particular moment because of what we just lived through with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think many people are having conversations about this, like the civil rights era in my house in the 1960s, in the late 1960s on the south side of Chicago, where it was like in your face, you had to be having these conversations, and we knew what side we were on. When it was Martin Luther King or mm-hmm. George Wallace, it was like, we know what side we're on. I think many Latinos and Latinas, you know, young up to, you know, 40, let's say, are having these conversations, and they are deciding exactly what side of the conversation they're on. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets really interesting in terms of like possibility, hope, coalition, this kind of awareness, because Latinos and Latinas are part and parcel of this historical reality. And we all saw what happened to, may he rest in peace, George Floyd. We all saw mm-hmm. it. Mm-hmm. And we know that, you know, we have to be making those documentations of what's happening in our own community, because there is so much fear that, and there's so much violence in our community from the police and other institutions. Que quien sabe if we even feel like we have the right to be filming, right? Because, you know, were it not for a citizen journalist, 17-year-old girl, we would not know. So I think it's really important that we understand privilege, but that we're also empowering people who really are incredibly vulnerable, like the people in Mississippi right now, muy vulnerables. Mm-hmm. They don't feel like they have anyone who has their back. And nationally, it's important that we're like, no, we see that you're not going anywhere.
Mm. You both mentioned how people are feeling, I guess, like they can be a little bit more outspoken. You're both very opinionated, and I mean that in a good way. You're both very outspoken. Maria, in your book, you talk about how one of your editors said you had a Latino agenda. So what do you say to people who say, you're journalists, you shouldn't express your own opinions, or what do you say to someone who accuses you of having an agenda?
Bueno, thankfully, I don't have to have those conversations anymore because I run my own media company that's just growing by leaps and bounds. So I don't have to give my excuse or any excuse at all. I think one thing that happened is that after what we lived through, I would normally get phone calls from people in the business who are like, well, Maria, don't you think you maybe went cross the line a little? Do you think that maybe you said something you shouldn't? Are you being too, again, advocacy or activist, which I'm just like, that's not what I am. I'm a journalist. Sorry that you interpret it as being some kind of activism. Activism actually takes a tremendous amount of work. Doesn't just kind of happen. You're not just an activist. But after what we lived through in the Trump administration, many of those people are not calling me anymore because they now were like, con qué cara? How can they pick up a phone and call me up and say, it seems like maybe you need to tone down what you're saying in terms of treating immigrants with more decency and humanity, because it went to the extreme. So, I'm able to situate the work that I do now as a journalist within the context of American history. So if these same people have the capacity to speak to Frederick Douglass, may he rest in peace, right, and come back to Frederick Douglass and say, oh, Mr. Douglass, you were too opinionated. You were taking the side of enslaved Black people. You were too opinion, which is what he was being told. You have to break this notion that there is a white man at the top of the hill of objectivity, and that he's the one who's able to say that's objective and that's not, and that's objective and that's not. No. So that's a much deeper conversation about the role of journalism, about understanding true representation in newsrooms, why that matters. It matters for business as much as it matters about the ethics of the business that we do. But no, this was never about an agenda. But let me tell you, I'm glad I never backed down. I'm glad I trusted my gut as a journalist. And that's what I love in Paola, is that, because of her father's work and others, including me, that she's able to trust her gut and to fight for the stories in the places where she's working right now. Because what we want the truth. We want the truth. We want the correct narrative. And if all of the media is being essentially run by white men of privilege who present heterosexual, then entonces qué? That's not the best journalism that we can do. That is not the best journalism we can do.
Right. I just want to add to that. I mean, alongside Maria, my dad was accused of the same thing. His whole career, he's been accused, like Maria, that he was pushing a Latino agenda. And I think you always have to ask yourself, who's saying that? And as Maria says, it's typically who's running the business and who are they? It's typically, white, hetero presenting men. And so it's simply because they're not used to hearing those voices. They weren't used to talking about Latinos, immigration. And when you mention it more than once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times, it becomes an agenda. And I think if I have a lesson to learn from Maria and my dad and the older generation of journalists that have created the foundation for us to be doing this work, is sometimes the only way to be doing this work is not necessarily being neutral. No, it is sometimes you do have to have a stance, right? Because that's the only way to delineate between what's right and wrong. And in this moment, it is so murky that the only way to find truth, as Maria says, is precisely by taking a stance. And sometimes a stance isn't political. It's not political. It is simply sometimes the right thing to do. So, yeah.
No, I admire your courage and what you do. I think it's awesome. I think we just have a few more minutes. real quick, Paola, I wanted to ask you about the term Latinx. You're saying it's not only a term to describe people, it's a movement. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the term is extremely controversial. People hate the term. But that to me is way more interesting, understanding why so many in the community dislike this term so much. And I think that says a lot about the moment that we're in, whereas there is something about the image of, you know, a community where you're standing next to a Black person, a trans person, and a documented person, Indigenous person. There's something about that image that many people in our community are not ready to see, do not want to see, or do not want to be a part of, you know? And so that is where I sort of like, I'm having this conversation about what it means to be Latinx. It's like, we need to dissect that. No, we need to dissect where that prejudice and bias and racism stems from. And because that's who we are. No, the 60 million of us that is the makeup of who we are. And so I say it's a movement because there is now finally this recognition. We saw it during George Floyd, where suddenly like Black Latinos were out in the streets teaching us, that was them too. And there is a movement where people among us, particularly young people, are saying that we need solidarity, and that solidarity is a lot stronger and more powerful than we've ever seen in history, because we're finally leaning into our diversity and understanding that it is a beautiful thing, and so yeah.
Maria, what are your thoughts on the term?
So recently, I think, I don't have the data in front of me, but Latino Rebels, which is part of Futuro Media, put out a story that said apparently the majority of Latinos they don't really care if it's Hispanic, Latino, Latina, or Latinx or Latine. And that's kind of the way it's been for a while, actually. Like in the scheme of things that matter to our community, it's not the most important thing.
Right.
And I love having these conversations because I've been around for a long time, and so, I'm one of those people who will never call myself Hispanic. You will never hear that. And Latine, Latinx, I don't have a problem with it. But, I anchor a show called Latino USA, and it's kind of old school, right? And it's like, yeah, we are old school because we've been around for a while, and that's like our trademark kind of thing. So, and also I've spoken to many trans Latinos and Latinas, and they told me, look, I want you to refer to me as Latino or Latina because I'm a trans Latino or trans Latina, and trans Latinx doesn't work for me. I want my gender. So I like to be very fluid and very respectful, which is kind of my way, to not be exclusionary, and certainly the way of Paola as well, to not be exclusionary and to be super respectful. But, the one thing that people should never call us is illegal. And that's where I draw the line. We are not an illegal people, and we can never allow people to call ourselves, or for us to call ourselves that too.
We are going to have to leave it there. And what time it has been. Oh my goodness. I was telling you before we started rolling that I was geeking out to meet the both of you. I was hoping for this interview. I've been waiting for this interview for a while, and it did not disappoint. You both have been great. And it's been such a pleasure. Again, Maria Hinojosa, author of Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in a torn America. And of course, Paola Ramos, Finding Latinx, In Search of the Voices, Redefining the Latino Identity. It's been a pleasure speaking with you both. I wish I had as much courage as the both of you. Thank you for doing what you do and telling the stories that you tell.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good to be with you, Paola.
You too, Maria. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you. And remember, you can purchase their books from our independent bookseller partners at bookshop.org/shop/SDFOB. Also, please consider supporting the San Diego Council on Literacy by visiting literacysandiego.org. And you can enjoy our full program of author panels, exciting demonstrations, and live entertainment streamed entirely online. All of the videos will be available on sdfestivalofbooks.com. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Luis Cruz. Have a great day, everybody.
Hello, I'm Jose Cruz. I'm the CEO for the San Diego Council on Literacy. We work with a network of 29 youth, adult, and family literacy programs that annually serve 160,000 residents of all ages at no cost. Our mission is to unite the community to support literacy. It's an exciting year for us. It's our 35th anniversary. It's also the 5th anniversary of the San Diego Union-Tribune Festival of Books. The San Diego Council on Literacy is a beneficiary of this event. So when you participate, you support literacy, especially through the author panels and just in general. So when you participate in this event, you also make it possible for another person, a child or an adult, to improve their reading and writing skills so they can read the books that you read. We have our favorite event activities. We like the Storytime Hour, and you probably have your favorites too. So we hope that you'll join us at the San Diego Union-Tribune Festival of Books and learn more too about the work of the San Diego Council on Literacy by going to literacysandiego.org. Thank you.